I think the genesis of this has to do with how I got into kind of these critical conversations in the first place, right? It starts when you grow up in the territories and you see that everything is normalized. And then as you learn, there's always a different reason why you shouldn't be paying attention to the colonial status. Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. Oh, there's a lot of disagreement among, you're just going to be endless fighting. There's tons of reasons to ignore it. I learned about how those kinds of intractable problems and how those kind of internal problems. What drew me to a project like Reframe is because I had that in my pocket, but I didn't understand the nuance of the difficulties that would come when I moved to the US. Because I thought, well, we've got our difficulties at home. There's a lot of division, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of, propaganda even. There's a lot of stuff that prevents, even within our territories, the unifying of people for the struggle for a non-territorial and non-colonial status, a dignified status. But when I came to the US, I was in a public policy grad school. So I was surrounded by people who are ostensibly, according to kind of the Western metrics of success and knowledge, people who knew absolutely nothing about Puerto Rico, and even less about the US Virgin Islands and Samoa and and all the other territories. So I realized that not only was there a problem of knowledge, when I tried to then have talks and explanations, I realized that even without them knowing it, a lot of Americans have internalized an imperial bias. And I want to call it an imperial bias because it strengthens imperial connections. They might not think of it that way. Even something as simple as, stop calling them colonies, their territories. It sounds like, to somebody, it sounds like a technical distinction. But in reality, it's a category misclassification that continues to hide the imperial dynamics of the relationship between the US and its territories, right? For the long-winded answer, the name Reframe comes from the fact that it's not just a problem of helping Americans see and know things that they weren't taught in schools about how all these territories were acquired and their complex history, but also about the fact that even sometimes when you show them these stories and show them these facts, you need to frame them in a way that allows them to see what's wrong. A great example is sometimes you'll be like, well, how is it justified that US laws made in Congress apply to the territories, despite the fact that there's no representation there, right? Whatever happened to no taxation without representation. I will hear back, oh, well, the territories don't have to pay income tax. And see, that seems like an answer, except that's such a simplistic reductionist view of the problem. So wait, so if you give me a tax break, you get to rule my life? So imagine if I go up to your house and I say, I'm going to pay your rent, and in exchange, you can't leave the house until I tell you. Do you see what I mean? Like, what they think are technical answers to a problem are actually the products of a bias that says, oh, as long as I don't charge you a certain tax, right? Because it's not like territories don't pay any single federal tax, especially when we're talking about payroll taxes. Territories certainly do pay federal taxes. But the logic that, oh, because you don't pay certain taxes, we have a right to your sovereignty. That's the implication of what they're saying. And that's imperial bias. And so we can't just talk about things. We need to reframe them in a way that highlights that imperial logic.